James had no idea he was helping the Empress of the Keth'vari collect dropped documents. He just saw someone who needed help and did not think to check their rank first. As James Wright navigated through the labyrinthine halls of the Keth'vari palace, his eyes scanned a thick file on interstellar trade regulations. His shoes clicked against the polished stone floors with each deliberate step. The last 3 days had been grueling yet enlightening and endless negotiations, with various high-ranking officials trying to understand Earth's trading policies and their place in the vast galaxy. He was so engrossed that he didn't notice a shadow crossing his path until it was too late. A collision occurred, papers scattering everywhere like confetti from an unexpected breeze. James instinctively dropped to one knee as documents fluttered around him, clutching handfuls of parchment and leather scrolls with golden tassels. "Are you all right?" he asked without hesitation, bending down beside a regally dressed woman who appeared stunned by the sudden interruption. The files were delicate. Any damage could cost hours or days in red tape to replace them. He carefully picked up each sheet and scroll, ensuring nothing was torn before placing them back into her arms. Once all scattered papers had been returned to their rightful place, he finally looked up at his mysterious companion. Her crimson skin glowed under the flickering lights of the palace corridors. Long silver hair cascaded down like a shimmering waterfall over one shoulder. She wore an intricate dress adorned with what appeared to be alien jewelry and symbols James couldn't interpret. "I am sorry for the collision," he murmured politely, straightening up once more. The woman regarded him silently for several heartbeats before finally speaking in flawless galactic standard, a rare thing given her appearance as a member of a species known only by their native tongue. "You are not from around here." "No, ma'am," James replied smoothly, his academic demeanor taking over despite the shock of realizing who he was addressing. "I am Dr. James Wright, sent to negotiate trade agreements on behalf of Earth." Her gaze sharpened as if she noticed something about him that had escaped her previous observations. "Do you work for a government or corporation?" she asked sharply, now curious rather than dismissive. "No, ma'am," James said with a genuine smile and shake of his head. "Just an independent linguist working on interstellar diplomacy." She tilted her head slightly, the first true curiosity James observed in her demeanor since he arrived at a rare emotion among Keth'vari nobility who treated outsiders like temporary guests at best. "You seem different," she said quietly. After a long moment's contemplation, it felt as though every word was carefully measured before being released into air, thick with unseen tension between them both. James laughed softly, more from relief than humor, knowing full well that the collision could have ended very badly for him, should he offend royalty by mistake. "Well, if you ever need help picking up documents again, I'll do my best not to drop them this time." To his surprise, she smiled back, a small quirk of lips that seemed both genuine and unexpected, and then turned swiftly on her heel, walking away down the hall in direction opposite where James needed to go. For a moment he just stood there watching her retreating figure, wondering what exactly had happened during their brief interaction. It wasn't until a palace guard approached him with an urgent message about another meeting did reality finally settle back into place around him and pull him out of this unexpected encounter's reverie. The afternoon dragged on, filled with more meetings and discussions that James found increasingly less engaging compared to his chance meeting earlier in the hallway. However, towards dusk, when he was preparing for one last round table discussion regarding cultural exchange programs between Earthlings and Keth'vari people, there came an unexpected summons from Empress Veyra herself through her assistant via holographic message. Her deep voice resonated across James' quarters without any prelude or pleasantries. "Dr. Wright," she began crisply, but with unusual formality for such a direct summoning, "report to my chambers immediately." He felt his stomach drop slightly at the abruptness of it all, though he had nothing to hide nor fear, since he approached everyone regardlessly from their station in life, treating each individual equally which seemed uncommon among Keth'vari nobles, who usually kept strict boundaries. Curiosity outweighed nervous apprehension, however, as he quickly made preparations for another walk down those never-ending palace corridors towards where the Empress waited. Arriving at her chambers, James felt a mix of awe and unease underpinning his curiosity. The room was grandiose, with lavish decor fitting someone in such an exalted position, yet there were moments that seemed oddly personal or intimate compared to other high-ranking officials' austere environments. "Enter," came Empress Veyra's voice coolly. Pushing open the heavy doors, he stepped inside, catching her standing near one of many windows, looking out over what must be a stunning view, but his eyes quickly darted back towards her as she turned around, facing him fully now. "Do sit down, Dr. Wright," she said, pointing at an ornately carved chair opposite hers. There was no additional instruction or explanation, so he did just that, folding himself into the seat awaiting whatever revelation this summons might bring. As James settled in before Empress Veyra's piercing gaze, questions swirled in his mind, but he held back from asking anything until she spoke again, breaking through silence once more with her unique command presence, still radiating power yet carrying hint of something else, a question, or perhaps even vulnerability. "You have intrigued me," the Empress said plainly, as if such an admission were insignificant, though James knew better than to think so little about any statement coming out from one holding absolute authority over an entire planet. "You are different. You did not cower when others fear my gaze, nor seek favors through flattery." He blinked several times, taken aback by this rare and open expression of thoughts, let alone compliments, directed towards him, who was nothing more than guest in grander scheme. "Well, thank you," James said after a moment's pause, gathering composure under unexpected praise. "It's just good manners to help someone who dropped something rather than walk past it." Empress Veyra blinked slowly, almost as if testing waters, with such simplicity of answer, before she nodded once sharply, seeming satisfied, or perhaps intrigued further by this response. "You know, you may not understand our ways, but I find your approach refreshing and honest." Her eyes softened slightly under his gaze, though they remained intense, never losing focus on him. "Tell me, Dr. Wright, do you believe in destiny?" Caught off guard again, James leaned back slightly, pondering the question before answering truthfully, given how unpredictable their conversation had been thus far. "Destiny, no," he said slowly, considering it carefully, then added with a small smile, "but I do think every choice we make shapes our path." Her lips twitched upwards into another rare and genuine smile, this time more relaxed than earlier, showing hint of warmth behind those calculating eyes. "If that's true, Dr. Wright," she paused dramatically, letting weightiness linger in air before continuing, "then perhaps your actions today have already changed course for both of us." With finality, Empress Veyra stood up, straightening her attire, then motioned towards door, dismissively dismissing him gracefully back to his quarters, with mystery thick as atmosphere around them. Leaving the chamber, James felt shaken, but strangely hopeful, wondering what path destiny his choice might lead him and Keth'vari Queen down next. In the grand hall of negotiations, where Keth'vari officials debated trade agreements and treaties with the human delegation, Empress Veyra's attention was divided between her advisor's heated arguments and Dr. James Wright's calm demeanor across the room. He listened intently to his fellow negotiators, without interruption or visible agitation, unlike many others who had lost their composure in such meetings. After 3 days of observing him from a concealed balcony, with only one-way glass separating them, Empress Veyra was convinced that she had found her answer amongst the humans. This unassuming scholar did not seek power or influence, but treated everyone around him regardless of status with patience and respect. She saw how he gave his dinner to a servant's child when no one else would notice, and most shockingly, how he helped an unknown woman pick up documents without recognizing her. These actions spoke volumes about Dr. Wright's character more than any words could ever convey. His unassuming approach was not just refreshing, but also unsettling in its sincerity. Empress Veyra had been untouched by such simplicity for centuries. She felt a strange mix of curiosity and fear as these unfamiliar emotions stirred within her. "Dismiss the chamber," she commanded tersely to her head advisor, Keth'vari, when they returned to their private chambers from another day's negotiation sessions. The hall emptied quickly at Veyra's word, leaving them alone once more under the heavy gaze of numerous guards and servants bowing low as if in prayer. "Kryn," she began with a soft voice that did not often grace her lips, but now felt strangely natural given their topic. "Begin preparations." Keth'vari froze mid-step. He was no stranger to receiving unusual requests from his empress over the centuries, but this one struck him speechless for once in his long service. "Preparations?" he managed finally, after swallowing hard against rising panic at such a turn of events unprecedented and terrifyingly out of character for their ruler. "Yes," she confirmed with an unwavering gaze. "I have decided to take a consort." Keth'vari choked audibly, his eyes widening as realization dawned far too painfully clear across his features. He had heard stories from ancient records about consorts, but knew better than most how disastrous such unions could be given the intricate power dynamics of Keth'vari society. "Empress," he stammered desperately, attempting to dissuade her with every diplomatic skill at hand, despite knowing it would likely fall on deaf ears. "This decision, do not question me, advisor." Her voice cut through his pleading like a sharp blade, instantly silencing any further objections before they could form fully around such impossibility of changing the Empress' mind once set firmly. He bowed low again, but left her chambers in quiet disbelief and dread, knowing full well that this single command would set into motion events far greater than anyone dared imagine as Keth'vari society was shaken from its foundations. Meanwhile, Dr. Wright was unaware of any impending royal decisions or the high stakes involved in his simple actions until one day he found himself summoned once more to Empress Veyra's presence, but this time under dramatically different circumstances. Instead of being ushered into her personal chambers behind closed doors, she walked directly through them and down grand hallways leading towards where negotiations usually took place. Every Keth'vari official who saw their empress coming so openly knew it meant only one thing, either war or significant change. They bowed immediately upon sight, as if struck by some invisible force compelling submission to her will alone. Dr. Wright's fellow negotiators had already assembled when Empress Veyra entered the hall, but she did not pause nor acknowledge their presence until reaching Dr. Wright's side specifically before turning all eyes back towards herself with command in HFY movement of regal authority held for centuries over an entire people and world. "James," she began without preamble, her tone a mix of urgency yet calm that both thrilled him uncomfortably due to its rarity, amidst usual cold detachment from Keth'vari politics. "Stand." He did so instantly, feeling all eyes upon them now, including those officials who had just knelt at mere sight alone. Empress Veyra pointed directly at James with one elegant finger, her voice clear as crystal when speaking next sentence that would alter course of entire empires forever. "That one. Begin the wedding preparations." James' jaw dropped slightly in shock, eyes wide beyond words for a moment before snapping back into focus on stunned faces around him. He was not sure what had just transpired, but it felt like dream or nightmare equally surreal. "Your Highness," he stammered out uncertainly, after regaining composure enough to speak coherently, again despite feeling far from comfortable with turn events had taken. "I don't understand." "That's all for now, James." She cut him off gently yet firmly before turning away once more, leaving behind whirlwind of shock and whispers among gathered officials who watched her leave without further explanation, except silent acknowledgement that their world was about to change dramatically. James stood there long after she had gone, feeling like a figure caught in some cosmic game where rules shifted beneath his feet. He looked around at the stunned faces around him, wondering if this bizarre turn of events meant what it seemed likely a union between himself and Empress Veyra herself. As he left to process all that happened under shadowed gaze of Keth'vari, officials still trying to grasp their new reality, he felt more bewildered than ever about his fate, entangled now with one who embodied power beyond imagination. Little did they both know how far-reaching the consequences would be, and what paths destiny or choices might truly shape for each going forward. And Dr. James Wright found himself surrounded by Keth'vari guards who escorted him through the labyrinthine corridors of the Imperial Palace towards an area he had never visited before. The grand hallways were lined with portraits and statues depicting past emperors and queens, their cold eyes watching his every step. His heart raced as he wondered if this was a punishment for some unknown infraction, or perhaps even were set his execution. The final leg of the journey led to what appeared to be private chambers more opulent than any room Dr. Wright had seen during previous negotiations. The guards opened an ornate door, ushering him inside before closing it firmly behind them. James stood in a large chamber filled with delicate carvings and intricate tapestries depicting scenes from Keth'vari history, his mind racing. Empress Veyra entered the room several moments later without preamble or fanfare, her presence as commanding as ever, but this time there was something different about it, almost like she saw a Wright in emotion James had never seen in a being of such power and authority. She dismissed the guards with a single gesture before turning to face him fully. "You do not know who I am," Veyra began, her deep crimson skin glowing faintly from within, as if reflecting some inner warmth that didn't quite match the cold exterior she maintained for centuries. James blinked in confusion, his mind working overtime. "I apologize if I caused offense earlier," he managed to say with a courteous bow of respect despite the bewildering situation. He had no idea what could have provoked such an invitation, or why it felt so ominous. "Caused something?" "Yes." Veyra's voice was calm, but there was an underlying tone that suggested amusement, though whether directed at him specifically remained unclear. "But not offense." She stepped closer to him now, the distance between them narrowing as if she were assessing some critical aspect of his character. James could feel her gaze piercing through the layers of academia and diplomacy he had cultivated over years. "Every suitor," Veyra continued in a voice that was both commanding yet strangely tender for one who held absolute power, "has wanted my authority and control, my throne's might." James straightened slightly despite feeling more nervous than ever. Her words were intriguingly personal, unlike any he had heard from the Empress before. "You helped me pick up papers without knowing I mattered," she said softly, but with emphasis that echoed through James' mind like a bell ringing in silence. "I have seen countless warriors and princes bow to my feet, craving power, but you merely saw someone who needed help." For a moment, he could see the slightest hint of genuine emotion pass over her otherwise stoic face, an expression so fleeting it seemed almost accidental, but deeply meaningful. 3 centuries, Veyra continued quietly, as if reciting an ancient truth rather than sharing something personal. "Your kindness is unlike anything I've ever experienced." The atmosphere in the room felt charged with latent energy, and a sense of profound change brewing beneath its surface. James could feel it pressing down on him like an invisible weight. Before he could respond, or before his mind fully grasped what was happening, the soft murmur outside the door caught their attention, signaling new arrivals approaching to carry out whatever order had been given for James' presence here today. "James," Veyra's voice interrupted any potential reply from him. She gestured sharply with one hand towards a group of guards waiting just beyond view through an open doorway leading into another chamber nearby. "Stand." He obeyed, his confusion mounting as more guards stepped in and positioned themselves around the room, like silent sentinels ready to carry out their empress's commands. "Begin," Veyra instructed simply, but with such finality that it chilled him despite her otherwise calm demeanor. Her eyes locked onto James, gold irises reflecting energy and intensity, he found difficult to look away from, even though his mind screamed warnings of potential danger or misunderstanding. Before anyone could react further, Empress Veyra turned sharply on one heel and left the room as abruptly as she had entered it earlier, with a regal posture that demanded immediate compliance without needing words. Guards closed ranks behind her instantly, leaving James standing alone amidst whispers from others who were watching this strange unfolding scene from afar. James' mind swirled in disbelief mixed with dread. "Your Highness," he called out weakly after several moments when it became clear there would be no further explanation forthcoming, his voice cracking slightly, as if trying to process an absurd dream or nightmare scenario rather than reality. "That's all for now, James." Her voice echoed back down the hallway like a clarion call, carrying with it authority and finality. He was dismissed, without any more context about why he had been brought here in such secrecy, only to be abruptly let go once again into bewildering circumstances. Stunned Dr. Wright stood there long after she disappeared from sight, wondering if this surreal turn of events marked the beginning of a union between himself and Empress Veyra herself. The implications were staggering, yet completely beyond comprehension for someone who had never sought such grandeur or power in his life. As he left to process all that transpired under watchful eyes of Keth'vari, officials still trying to grasp their new reality, James felt more bewildered than ever about fate now entangled with one who embodied might and mystery beyond imagination. Little did either realize how far-reaching consequences would shape paths destined for each going forward. He walked out into the corridors lined, once again, by portraits and statues of past emperors and queens. But this time every single figure seemed to mock him, silently representatives from a culture where power could be as easily given away or taken up depending on whims of those who wielded it. As he turned towards what felt like an uncertain future at that moment, James wondered if his life was about to change in ways even more profound than the already extraordinary journey he had embarked upon. And Chapter 4 The Objection. James stood in the grand hall of Keth'vari's imperial palace, his thoughts racing like a storm within him as he tried to process what had just occurred. He was still acutely aware of the guards surrounding him and their silent watchfulness. Yet it was not them that frightened James, rather it was Veyra's command, a mere 2 words, "Begin," that sent an electric shiver down his spine. A hush fell over those present, as if they too were holding their breaths in anticipation of what was to come next. The silence only lasted for a moment before being broken by the regal sound of Empress Veyra's voice, clear and resounding with authority, but also tinged faintly with something unfamiliar. "Hope." "James," she called out sharply yet not unkindly. He turned towards her direction instinctively, as if drawn in by some unseen force. His gaze met hers for the briefest instant before he forced his eyes away from those piercing gold irises that seemed to see right through him, analyzing every thought and feeling without ever blinking an eye. The sudden warmth of Veyra's crimson skin against his hand when she had picked up dropped documents still lingered in his memory. The guards' movements were swift and precise as they stepped forward, now ready to carry out their empress's orders, but paused just outside the threshold, waiting for further instruction from Her Highness. James felt a growing sense of unease. He was utterly confused. He had no idea what this all meant, or why his presence here suddenly seemed so significant. "Stand," Veyra instructed calmly, yet with such force that it set every nerve in him on edge. Despite the calm tone she used to deliver her command, her words were final, leaving no room for doubt about their meaning, but also not offering any further explanation as to why they needed to be followed now. He complied out of sheer respect and an instinctive understanding of this alien culture where such commands held weight beyond mortal comprehension or reasoning abilities. Guards positioned themselves around the chamber in a way that felt more like preparation for some kind of ritual than protection from physical threats, though the possibility remained open-ended enough not to be ruled out entirely. "Begin," she stated simply yet with utter finality, turning sharply on one heel and marching towards an exit doorway leading deeper into the palace's labyrinthine corridors. As if by magic or long practiced habit, guards closed ranks behind her, instantly creating a wall of disciplined silence between them and James, who was left standing alone amidst whispers from others watching this unfolding scene with wide-eyed awe. James' mind swirled in disbelief mixed with dread as he called out weakly, after several moments when it became clear there would be no further explanation forthcoming. "Your Highness," his voice cracked slightly, betraying the turmoil within him at having been brought here under such secretive circumstances, only to be dismissed just as abruptly without any context or understanding of what was happening. "That's all for now, James." Her voice echoed back down the hallway like a clarion call, carrying with it authority and finality. He was dismissed without another word, leaving an air of mystery thick in his wake that threatened to suffocate him with its weight if he dwelled upon it too much longer than necessary. Stunned into silence by these inexplicable events surrounding him now, James walked out slowly, amidst the guards' watchful eyes, and towards what felt like some surreal dream-turned-nightmare scenario rather than a reality of diplomatic negotiations gone awry. The implications were staggering yet completely beyond comprehension for someone who had never sought such grandeur or power in his life. He left behind an array of officials still trying to grasp their new reality as he turned away from them, wondering if this strange turn of events marked the beginning of something far more profound than what any human could ever have imagined possible. The corridors were lined with portraits and statues of past emperors and queens, every single figure seeming to mock him, silently representatives from a culture where power could be as easily given away or taken up depending on whims of those who wielded it. As James walked further into the palace's winding hallways, his heart raced, not just due to physical exertion, but because he felt more bewildered than ever about fate now entangled with one who embodied might and mystery beyond imagination. Little did either realize how far-reaching consequences would shape paths destined for each going forward. James' quarters were simple compared to the grandeur of Veyra's palace, yet they offered a stark contrast against the opulence that surrounded him daily on this alien world. He sat down heavily onto his bed after locking himself inside those private chambers, hoping for some respite from all recent confusion and anxiety building up within him layer by painstaking layer over days spent here negotiating with Keth'vari representatives who seemed more interested in observing human reactions than making any concrete progress towards trade agreements between planets so vastly different culturally, politically, economically. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to piece together the sequence of events from Veyra's sudden summons earlier that day, her dismissive yet oddly respectful mannerisms toward him when picking up documents, her gaze meeting his in passing, filled with an intensity impossible for mere chance encounters, and now this. What was it exactly? What did she want? James' thoughts wandered back to the most recent encounter where Veyra had seemed almost flustered, something completely out of character for one who radiated unflappable confidence under any circumstances. It didn't take long before he realized there could only be one reason why such an abrupt change in demeanor might occur. She wanted him, despite all logic and tradition standing against such a union. A chill ran down his spine at that realization, but also with it came something unexpected, a spark of curiosity mixed perhaps naively with excitement about what possibilities lay ahead, if indeed this was true. He had never been one to seek power or grandeur in life, rather he found contentment within scholarly pursuits and understanding diverse cultures without ever desiring their trappings. Yet here now, amidst alien customs vastly different from those known on Earth, James Wright of modest means found himself thrust into a role where the only thing preventing him from becoming something greater than anything his planet could offer was perhaps just Veyra's own reservations. He shook his head slightly, as if trying to dispel such fantastical notions, but couldn't quite deny that some part of him genuinely wanted answers to understand why, after all these years, she chose now, at this moment, with someone so unlike any other potential suitor before him, someone who had shown no interest in her power or influence. As James pondered deeper on these thoughts, a soft knock interrupted his solitude once more, sending another ripple through already turbulent waters of recent developments surrounding Veyra's sudden turn toward him for some unexplained reason. "Enter," he called out cautiously, unsure now whether to hope for clarity amidst confusion reigning supreme, or brace himself against possible rejection following what seemed almost like a prelude toward something monumental. The door opened slowly, revealing none other than Empress Veyra herself, standing there in all her timeless beauty and regal splendor, though even she looked somewhat hesitant today, shoulders slightly hunched despite wearing elaborate imperial regalia that otherwise commanded immediate respect from anyone fortunate enough to lay eyes upon it within Keth'vari's grand halls. James rose immediately from his seated position, meeting her gaze head on without flinching, as he had grown accustomed to doing ever since their first encounter, which now felt like aeons ago rather than mere days. "Your Majesty," he greeted politely, yet with an underlying tone of inquiry hinting subtly toward seeking answers for questions lingering unspoken between them. Veyra's lips curled into a smile so genuine it broke something inside James, freeing him from any remaining doubts about her intentions here today, though what exactly those might be remained unclear even now, as she stepped forward slowly, almost hesitantly, like someone approaching unknown territory, unsure whether to expect friendliness or hostility in response. I understand this must come as quite the shock," Veyra began softly yet clearly, choosing every word with deliberate care before continuing further when assured he was listening closely enough. "But allow me to explain why I believe marriage between us is not only possible, but necessary given current circumstances." James listened intently, absorbing each detail carefully, without interrupting, even though his mind raced ahead considering implications and repercussions arising from such a bold proposal that defied centuries of tradition within Keth'vari's royal lineage. "You do know who you are asking to marry, don't you?" he finally asked hesitantly, once Veyra fell silent, momentarily waiting for him to process everything relayed thus far. "Empress Veyra, the Eternal, is not someone one casually commits to in life." A soft chuckle escaped her lips, sounding almost amused despite any underlying seriousness surrounding this conversation now unfolding between them. She stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his arm, a gesture so intimate yet also respectful it sent another shiver down James' spine. "I have interviewed thousands of suitors who knew exactly who I was and what they stood to gain from such an alliance," Veyra explained calmly, though eyes reflecting intensity behind gold irises that seemed almost alight with anticipation. "But you wanted nothing but a chance at friendship, perhaps, or mutual respect based solely on your own merits rather than any desire for power." James considered her words, thoughtfully nodding slowly before responding carefully, as if weighing each syllable chosen prior to letting them fall from his lips freely into this charged atmosphere thick with unspoken promises and potential consequences. "What if I am wrong about myself?" he asked genuinely, unsure of how much truth lay behind such self-reflection when placed under scrutiny by an empress who had seen countless others fail at understanding themselves, let alone attempting alliances built on foundations far more solid than mere fleeting emotions or desires for dominance over one another. Veyra's gaze softened just slightly, almost as if she understood the weight this question carried, even though it seemed to bring a smile curling up corners of her lips unexpectedly. "Then I will be wrong for the first time in 300 years," she admitted quietly yet confidently, something that both shocked and intrigued James at once. "And you find that prospect exciting?" He couldn't help but ask, curious about what exactly lay behind such an open admission from one so guarded by nature against revealing weaknesses or doubts openly to anyone outside innermost circle of advisors privy to knowledge surrounding Keth'vari's long-kept traditions regarding royal unions. A real smile now spread across Veyra's face, a rare sight indeed for the usually stoic ruler. "It does," she confessed honestly without reservation, her eyes reflecting both excitement and nervousness. That ancient emotion James found himself mirroring despite his own reservations about such an unprecedented decision that could reshape not just their lives, but entire interstellar relations between planets. "I do hope you understand my reasons now," Veyra continued, gently releasing her hold on him, though hand lingered briefly, as if reluctant to let go of this moment too quickly. "I will need your cooperation going forward in what promises to be a unique yet potentially rewarding journey for both us." James nodded slowly, his heart racing not just with apprehension, but also unexpected eagerness about exploring these uncharted territories together under Veyra's guidance as they ventured into unknown waters fraught with challenges and opportunities alike. "Your Highness," James responded finally, after several silent moments, allowing words to form properly before speaking them aloud once more, this time infused with genuine respect mixed perhaps now cautiously optimistic hope for future ahead despite any uncertainties lingering within both their hearts. He knew there was much work still needed on part of him to prove worthiness amidst such lofty expectations, yet equally understood that Veyra herself likely harbored similar doubts about readiness given centuries old customs standing against this sudden turn towards unexpected union between two beings from worlds so vastly different culturally and politically. But perhaps therein lay beauty of their potential alliance, set minds coming together not just because they wanted something but rather out genuine respect for each other's merits beyond any superficial desires or ambitions typically motivating such arrangements within Keth'vari society, where power could indeed change hands easily under right circumstances. Veyra offered him a final reassuring nod before turning towards door leading back into Palace. Dr. James Wright felt a shiver run down his spine as he turned to face Grand Vizier Keth in the grand hall of Keth'vari's imperial palace. The vizier's eyes were cold, calculating an unmistakable signal that trouble was brewing. "Dr. Wright," began Keth with forced politeness, though every word dripped venom like acid rain on stone. "You know our customs well by now, and must also understand the importance of a stable union for Empress Veyra." James nodded slightly, his expression unchanged as he adjusted his glasses ever so subtly under Keth's intense gaze. "I would hate to see such an important alliance compromised," continued the vizier smoothly, crossing his arms over his chest in a challenge. "So tell me, how do you propose we ensure your suitability for Empress Veyra?" James studied Keth's face carefully before answering, his tone even and respectful despite feeling like he was walking into a trap. "I believe that our compatibility should be judged by mutual understanding rather than competition," replied James. Keth scoffed at this unexpected reply, but hid it quickly behind an almost imperceptible twitch of his lips. "Competitions are necessary to prove strength, loyalty, and worth," argued the vizier with a condescending smile. "I propose we start simple. I challenge you in combat, swords or any other way." James raised both eyebrows at this turn of events, but kept his tone level as he responded. "Combat is not my expertise, Vizier Keth, nor is it something that would demonstrate the compatibility between Empress Veyra and me." Keth's smile turned bitter for a moment before hardening into something more sinister. "Then perhaps you should compete in what interests us both." "And what might those be?" James asked, his curiosity piqued even as he prepared himself for whatever challenge Keth was about to present. The vizier's eyes gleamed with malevolent intent. "Linguistics," he sneered, knowing how well First, James was in the intricacies of Keth'vari language and culture. James nodded slowly, his mind racing through strategies on how best to handle such a challenge without insulting Keth or appearing arrogant about his own abilities. As days passed, whispers began circulating among palace staff, rumors sown by none other than Grand Vizier Keth himself. James found it difficult not to roll his eyes at the absurdity of these baseless allegations spreading like wildfire through every corridor and chamber. Dr. Wright was supposedly disloyal, untrustworthy, a threat more insidious for being subtle. James ignored most gossip, but one afternoon, during a meeting with an advisor named Zevran, man who had first introduced him to Empress Veyra, felt compelled to address these rumors head on despite his usual aversion towards unnecessary confrontation. Rumors can be dangerous, James stated calmly when the conversation turned towards such idle chatter, catching both Zevran and several other advisors off guard. Indeed, responded one of them with a wary glance at Keth, who stood on the opposite side of the room, his face an unreadable mask. But what can we do about it? James took a deep breath, knowing he had to be careful how he phrased things next. We should not let fear or mistrust dictate our actions, he replied evenly. Instead, I suggest we focus on understanding one another and building trust through honest dialogue. Keth bristled at these words, but kept his cool facade intact, watching James with narrowed eyes, as if waiting for a misstep. That night, however, Keth made the most dangerous move yet when he attempted to poison James during what appeared initially to be nothing more than another simple meal. The sudden appearance of Empress Veyra at their dinner table had thrown everyone into disarray momentarily, until it became clear that she was there not as a guest, but with urgent business. Keth, the Empress's voice sliced through tension like cold steel, her eyes narrowing dangerously upon seeing James take an involuntary step back from his meal. Explain this at once. The vizier paled visibly under Veyra's intense stare and bowed deeply in abject apology before stumbling over himself to clarify that it had all been a mistake, a misunderstanding brought about by misplaced concerns for Empress Veyra's safety. Veyra, however, was having none of his excuses. She ordered him arrested forthwith, her voice leaving no room for argument as guards swiftly moved to execute the order without hesitation or delay. James watched this dramatic turn of events unfold with a mixture of shock and awe-shock at Keth's audacity and sheer cruelty towards someone who posed absolutely no threat in military terms, awe at Veyra's strength, despite centuries spent maintaining an image more stoic than emotional. Once the vizier was led away by guards, leaving behind only stunned silence amongst those present, Empress Veyra turned her piercing gaze directly upon James. He felt as though she could see right through him. Very thought and emotion laid bare under that unwavering golden scrutiny. You handled all of this with remarkable calm, noted the Empress finally, after several long moments had passed in quiet contemplation between them alone amidst gathering darkness outside palace windows, reflecting her powerfully regal figure within room itself. James merely shrugged, not entirely sure how to take such high praise from one so accustomed to wielding authority over countless lives and planets alike. I study cultures, he explained simply enough for anyone listening, without wanting to read too much into those words' deeper implications regarding his personal philosophy on conflict resolution or diplomacy more broadly speaking across galactic boundaries. Veyra seemed almost surprised by this understated explanation, but then a real smile spread across her face, a rare occurrence indeed that left even James feeling momentarily awestruck. That is understandable, she said quietly yet with unmistakable force behind those two simple words, though perhaps not entirely forgivable. He blinked in confusion for just an instant before understanding dawned on him. It was clear from Veyra's demeanor, now softened slightly by genuine emotion, that her feelings toward him had indeed grown beyond mere curiosity, or even professional interest. And as she leaned forward, ever so gently to press a kiss upon his cheek, gesture both tender and bold in its intimacy. James felt something shift within himself too. Here stood before him not just an empress, but also someone who genuinely saw past all superficial layers of status, culture, language barriers right down into very essence, where no other had succeeded previously during centuries-long rule under her ironclad will alone. "I do hope you understand my reasons now," she murmured almost reverently against his earlobe, sending shivers running through him despite knowing there were still many miles to go before such union could ever truly be called secure amidst Keth'vari's complex politics and long-standing traditions regarding royal marriages or unions altogether, let alone with an outsider from entirely different planet. James nodded slowly, again, this time, however, not just out of respect, but because he truly believed in possibility they shared despite challenges still looming large ahead. "Your Highness," he began finally, after several silent moments, allowing words to form properly before speaking them aloud once more, infused now indeed genuinely respectful yet cautiously optimistic hope, looking towards future horizon where unknown waters waited, fraught with both daunting uncertainties alongside promising opportunities, alike awaiting discovery. Veyra offered him a final reassuring nod before turning towards door leading back into palace halls, echoing loudly behind her retreating figure, leaving James standing there alone amidst sudden silence, feeling oddly lighter somehow within heart despite weighty responsibilities now surely lying ahead for them together as unlikely pair destined perhaps to forge new path through uncharted territories where no other had dared tread before. As the chapter concludes, Empress Veyra's decision becomes clear. She steps forward into unknown territory with James by her side, apart. Worship built not on power or deceit, but mutual respect and understanding amidst challenges posed by traditional boundaries long held dear within Keth'vari society. This moment marks beginning of new journey for both them, as they venture forth together towards future uncertain yet promising, full of untold possibilities waiting to be explored through lens of their combined unique perspectives, bridging gap between worlds divided previously by countless barriers, whether cultural or political in nature. The chapter ends here, exactly where the plot beat specifies. The grand hall of Keth'vari's imperial palace was bathed in a warm glow as evening descended upon the vast city beyond its golden walls. James Wright stood alone, his mind racing through the events that had transpired over the past day. His encounter with Empress Veyra, the eternal, seemed like an age ago now, but felt impossibly close at heart. He heard soft footsteps approaching and turned to see Veyra herself entering once more. Her crimson skin shimmered under the light, her gold eyes fixed intently upon him as she paused in front of a large tapestry depicting past emperors and queens of Keth'vari's lineage. James could sense the weight of history around them, but also felt a strange comfort knowing that he was about to break centuries-long tradition. "Dr. Wright," Empress Veyra began softly, her voice carrying an unusual warmth that made him pause in his thoughts. "There is much we must do now if our path forward is truly one shared." James nodded slowly, feeling the gravity of what she implied, even as he still struggled to wrap his mind around it fully. He cleared his throat and met her gaze squarely. "Your Highness," James replied respectfully yet with a touch of uncertainty in his tone, "I understand that there are significant implications for such changes." Veyra's expression softened further, an almost imperceptible smile curling at the corners of her lips, a gesture so rare it sent a shiver down James' spine. "You have been correct all along," she said with quiet confidence. "Your approach here has taught us both much about mutual respect and understanding beyond our differences." James blinked in surprise. He had never thought his simple acts of kindness could carry such weight, but now that Veyra spoke these words openly, it was impossible to deny their significance. "Is this why you've asked me to stay?" James ventured carefully, after a moment's consideration. Veyra turned fully towards him then, her eyes gleaming with an intensity he had never seen before. "Indeed," she confirmed quietly yet firmly, "your presence here has shown us all that even centuries-old traditions can evolve when guided by the right principles." She stepped closer to James now, and took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what was next. "Dr. Wright, I am going against every instinct bred into me over these 300 years," Veyra confessed softly yet with unmistakable resolve in her voice. "I wish to marry you, not just he another consort, but enter fully into partnership based on mutual respect and understanding." James' breath caught at the audacity of such an offer, his mind struggling to process what she was suggesting. "Marry?" he repeated numbly, not sure if this was a dream or reality unfolding before him. "Your Highness, I am no prince nor politician, but simply James Wright, a humble xenolinguist who came here seeking nothing more than peaceful communication." Veyra's golden eyes locked onto his face with an intensity that made his heart race. "Exactly," she responded, her voice firm yet tender at the same time. "That is precisely why I chose you." Her hand reached out tentatively and brushed against James' arm lightly, as if to reassure herself of what was real before proceeding further into unknown territory alongside him. "I need someone who understands these principles better than anyone else," she continued solemnly, her eyes never leaving his face despite the enormity of this decision. "Someone willing not just to be by my side, but also challenge me when needed and support unconditionally." James felt a lump form in his throat as he absorbed every word from Veyra's lips. Her sincerity was palpable even through cultural barriers, making it impossible for him to dismiss what she proposed lightly. "Your Highness," James finally answered after collecting himself with some effort, "your offer is both an honor and responsibility I could not have anticipated." Veyra nodded gently in acknowledgement of his words, but did not retreat from her decision either. She took another deep breath, then spoke again more firmly, this time around their shared future path. "The wedding requires your consent," she said simply yet with immense weight behind it, "given Keth'vari's complex traditions regarding unions and power dynamics within imperial lineage. Will you have me? Not my empire, not my throne. Me." James stared at Veyra for what felt like an eternity, as these simple but profound words sank in deeply. This ancient and powerful woman asking him to share her life completely without any guarantees of immediate returns or political favors. He thought about his own quiet existence back on Earth, a solitary scholar with no ambitions beyond understanding languages and cultures different from his own. And then he considered the loneliness Veyra had endured for centuries at such an exalted position, always alone, yet still seeking genuine connection devoid of ulterior motives or hidden agendas. James reached out slowly to place a hand over hers, resting lightly on his arm, a gesture both reassuringly tender as well as silently affirming mutual respect and shared intent moving forward. He looked back into her gold eyes, then spoke with equal parts honesty, humility, and determination, now clear within him too after days spent learning not just about Keth'vari's culture, but also understanding Veyra's personal journey leading up to this moment. "I study languages," James replied finally, in answer to her question. "Me yours." Veyra's eyes widened slightly at the simplicity of his response, yet it spoke volumes as well regarding their shared path ahead, built on mutual learning and respect rather than expectations or imposed obligations from either side alone. "That is all I need," he concluded softly, but with unmistakable sincerity behind those simple words. Empress Veyra nodded gently in agreement, then gave him a small nod of reassurance before turning towards the door leading back into palace halls, where her advisors awaited, no doubt already abuzz over sudden turn events had taken today. She paused briefly, looking once more at James, standing there amid silence, yet feeling strangely lighter, despite challenges still looming large ahead for both them together now, as unlikely pair destined indeed to forge new path through uncharted territories, waiting discovery and exploration side by side. James watched her retreating figure leave before turning around himself back into his room, where preparations awaited him alongside newfound sense of purpose arising from unexpected turn events had taken over past few days. He felt the weight of responsibility settling upon his shoulders, yet also a strange peace within heart knowing they shared journey now ahead regardless uncertainties or barriers that might lie between them still uncharted. James becomes Emperor Consort, a role he fills by continuing to be himself, helping people, studying cultures, treating everyone with respect. The Empress finds ruling is easier with someone to discuss decisions with. Their marriage is not traditional Roman seat, is partnership built on mutual understanding and respect amidst challenges posed by political complexities long held dear within Keth'vari society. One night, as they sat side by side discussing upcoming reforms meant balancing tradition with modern needs of their diverse populace, Veyra turned towards him hesitantly, after several hours deliberating over various aspects involved in such changes required for progress to happen effectively moving forward. "James," she began softly, her voice tinged slightly with worry despite knowing they had decided together. "Do you ever regret what happened?" He looked at her, then gently placed a hand on hers, resting lightly across tabletop between them before turning fully towards Veyra, now facing him directly. I in this moment shared. "I do not," James answered firmly yet tenderly, looking into eyes that held centuries of wisdom alongside newly found sense hope and possibility through partnership forged despite initial doubts from both sides alike. "You sought me out first because I showed simple kindness to stranger needing help, not wanting anything yourself initially, but then finding genuine connection amidst chaos where none had existed before." Veyra's gaze softened further as she listened intently, hearing sincerity within James' words, alongside validation regarding path they shared together, now finally free from constraints previously limiting such possibilities for centuries. "You wanted nothing," Veyra murmured softly, still processing enormity of changes wrought through mutual respect and understanding rather than imposed obligations or expectations alone. "So I could give you everything." James smiled warmly at that recognition before leaning forward, gently pressing a kiss upon her cheek, a gesture both tenderly affectionate yet boldly intimate given their current circumstances, as unlikely pair navigating uncharted territories together. "Me too," he replied softly with genuine fondness within heart, seeing partnership blossoming amidst challenges faced side by side through shared journey ahead, promising untold possibilities waiting discovery and exploration, moving forward without fear or hesitation ever again between them, now bonded not just politically but personally. Indeed,